Welcome back to another episode of Blueprint to Ultra, hosted by me, Steve Epifano, and Jeff Winchester. Here on the show, we believe running is more than just miles on the trail. It's a gateway to community, resilience, and discovering what you're really capable of. Each episode, we bring you stories and conversations to help shape your personal blueprint for ultra running success. Today's guest is someone who not long ago would have told you that he was not a fan of running. Growing up in a small town in upstate New York, sports options were limited. There was no track team, no cross country. But he found his way into fitness through CrossFit and the military, where running was just something he had to do, not something he chose to do. He's a husband, a father, a business owner, and he's been serving in the Army Reserves for over 14 years. He's completed 4 races in total that we could see anyway. The Hydra 50K, Whitewater Center 50 miler, the Mount Mitchell Heartbreak 50 miler, and most recently, and this is probably where we will be camping out here for as long as possible, the Massanutten 100. Hopefully I said that right. He's showing us all that you can go big even when life's already full. With that, please welcome Troy Rasmussen to the show. Thanks for coming here. Appreciate having you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Can't wait to chat all about stuff.
I can't wait to hear
Absolutely.
Steve keep saying Massanutten 100 multiple times.
Massanutten 100, and then even, and then Troy Rasmussen. It's rough. It was a rough combination together there.
It's a lot of syllables.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So Troy, you're relatively new to ultras and to running in general. What got you into running ultras and running in the first place?
So, kind of 2 different ways we can go with this. I'll just start with running. So, like I said on the bio, I did CrossFit because I loved like all the work that I had to put in for it, but I hated the running part of it. So I did it in college, and it was a way for me to get cardio and do cardio without having to run, just lift weights fast, So I hated it, but that was my way to get some cardio in without actually having to run. So fast forward like 10 years, I actually really got into running when a family member of mine had a pretty bad kind of medical situation going on that I don't want to get into all the details on it, but she was in really rough shape, and there was some family members of mine decided to put on a 5K fundraiser. It's a virtual 5K. The main race was up in New York, but I'd already lived in North Carolina at the time, so my goal was to just run a 25-minute 5K, and thinking about her, my cousin, and everything that she had to go through with her recovery from this medical incident, all the strength that she just had to draw from each and every day, I sort of tapped into that, just trying to train for this 5K. And so by kind of tapping into that, it allowed me to overcome just the discomfort of running, my distaste for it. And I was able to do that 5K in 25 minutes, and that just kind of took things off. And so my biggest reason for sticking with running is I did all that training, I gained all that fitness, and then I'm like, man, I just don't want to lose this. I want to keep going. So just put in all that work, and I just didn't want it to be for nothing in the long term. So then fast forward about a month or two, one of my best friends, he was kind of going through some stuff in his life, and we were just looking for something to do together, to connect, just for us to check in on each other and kind of give us a common goal to work towards together. So we just signed up for the Charlotte Half Marathon, and we got a training program together. So every day we were kind of sending each other, hey, how'd you do on your run? How'd you do on this? We shared that stuff on Strava, but it was just a way to connect on a daily basis and train for something together to kind of help him, maybe distract him from the stuff that he had going on in his life, but also just to give him something to, just some support, And then again, I trained for something, gained some fitness, and I just didn't want to lose it. So every time that we did a race, we just decided to sign up for another one. We ended up doing the Myrtle Beach half marathon. We pushed up to the Charlotte Marathon the following year, and it just kind of escalated from there. And so the reason that I got into ultras, my wife hates this story, but I started to I got this little rack in the closet where I have my medals from I did a 15K, the half marathon, full marathon, things like that. And my wife just looks at him and she goes, "You should try to get a cool medal."
I love this story.
Yeah.
So that leads me to just going Googling, and I ended up finding this race with this cool title, and I just figured that there would probably be a cool medal attached to it. That race was the Hydra 50K, directed by Jeff Winchester. So that's how I bumped into Jeff, and that was my introduction to ultras. So that's how I got in.
So I'm definitely going to come back to the fact that you and I have met. That's why I didn't want to do the intro. I didn't want to just like steal the thunder here and say, I've known Troy for about a year now, actually, from your experience at the Hydra 50K. But what you said at the beginning was, I think, something that, as you were telling the story about running in honor of your cousin and your first 5K, I know we're not going to get into the details of it and everything, but you talked about it being hard and being difficult, and that it was a really big challenge. And I mean, this is an ultra running podcast. And what's insane is that many of us have lost sight of the fact that we started off trying to run a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, and training for our first 5K or 10K can be really hard for people. And, you know, we take it for granted, I think, now, because a recovery run is going to be a 45-minute run. And, you know, you were aiming to finish a 5K in 25 minutes. You're like, you know what I'm saying? And so it's just different now. And I think we lose sight of it. So I appreciate you actually sharing that story. Now, the Hydra 50K, yes, I used to be a race director for that race. It's no longer around. So if you ran the race, or if anybody has looked for it, it's only on Ultrasign. I think we ran it for 2 years, I think. Yeah. It was a fun race, and definitely was one of the things that I think was your first experience with it. Now, whether or not your wife likes that medal, I think you have much cooler ones since that point, but we had a good time with that race. So let's talk about
ultras do have some pretty good medals.
Well, we're going to still pretend that ours was pretty good at the Hydra. But let's talk about your first experience in an ultra. Now, it was the Hydra 50K, which, for those that don't know, that race, that, like I said, it's no longer around, so I'm not going to try to sell it to you, but it was a race that had 5 different loops, and the loops were random, and runners had no idea which loop they were going to run. And the miles range anywhere between 4.5 miles per loop all the way up to 7.5 miles per loop. Again, runners had no idea which ones they were going to draw. They had to run all 5 loops, and the order was random for each runner. And so it was part of the part of that race was intended to really create a sense of uncertainty in runners' minds, which is the added element of a good ultra. And so we went with that. And anyway, that's the scene. So it's a flat trail system that is located on southeastern North Carolina. You decided you were going to come down to get your first medal from an ultra. And so tell us then, was it everything that it lived up to be for you?
Oh, it was so much harder than I was expecting it to be. So I'm a goal-oriented person. I show up at any race that I go to, I'm like, I got a goal. I want to hit it. I don't care if it's my first time going for that. And I showed up to get my bib the night before the race. And I'm just kind of, looking around, seeing what the competition's like, and talking to Jeff. And I just get chatting with this guy, and I'm like, what's your goal? What do you want to do out here? And he's like, I just want to finish. Finish. And I'm like, yeah, but you got to have a number in your head, right? Like, you got to have a number. Well, he goes, well, what's your number? I'm going to do this in 6 hours. I'm like, I run a marathon, 4 hours. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's only a couple more miles. Like, I can do it. 6 hours. I got that in the bag. It's not that hilly. Well, like Jeff said, this race had different length loops, and you never knew how long the next loop was going to be. But my watch was running. I'm going through the race, 20 miles, 25 miles, and I'm doing some math in my head. Okay, this is a 50K, so it's 31 miles. It is 31 miles. I get to the end of my 4th loop, and I am cramping. I am seizing up. I don't feel like I could go any farther, but my watch said I was 27 miles into the race. So I'm like, perfect. The last loop is going to be the shortest one, 4.5 miles. Here we go. Give me the bracelet. And then I just asked out of curiosity. I was pretty confident it was only going to be 4.5 miles. But I asked my crew, I was like, what's everybody saying the length of this loop is? And they go, 7.2 miles. I'm just like, no, I'm just devastated. I'm cramping. I have no idea what to do with nutrition, with hydration. I'm like falling apart. And my goal of hitting 6 hours just evaporated when they told me it was 7.2 miles. I'm like, I barely make it to the finish line. I think I finished in like 7.5 hours or something. I was like, death marching the last 3 miles. But that race was it was such a good introduction to ultras because it had everything that I try to tell people about when it comes to ultras. The community was amazing. It was a loop course, so all the crews are in one spot. So my wife is there. She's mingling with other crews. She's getting to know people, making friends, and I'm trying to think. Yeah, the uncertainty of it was a cool thing, and it was just humbling. It was on the trail. It was way hotter than I was expecting, and it just allowed me to learn so much more about running than, hey, I'm doing a marathon that is definitely 26.2 miles. It is definitely all on the road. It lets you kind of prepare for different things, and the community part is really what I love so much, and my wife loves it. She gets to hang out with other people, and if she didn't love it, then I probably would not be doing it as much as I am right now. So that's a huge perk.
Yeah, that's one of the things that keeps coming up consistently, I think, in our podcast is the community aspect of ultra running too. And I'm probably sure that guy you were talking to probably beat you too, because you can never judge a book by its cover. That's another thing to learn in the trail races and ultras is like the guy in New Balance shoes is gonna probably smoke you.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. I don't even remember what his name was, but
Yeah.
Well, just to be clear, because I know that runners tend to yell at their race directors about the distances of their ultras. It was quite clear on our website that it was a 50K-ish. And so we stressed the ish at our pre-race meetings and everything because we knew it was going to go long. The other thing is you're on trails, they always go long. But yeah, 6 hours, that was a lofty goal.
I don't know. I try to set the bar high and see what I can do. Just wait until you hear about my goal for Massanutten.
Oh, we're going to get there.
We'll get there.
We have some theories. Well, so let's close this out a little bit. So again, Steve mentioned in the introduction that you have done the Hydro 50K, you did the Whitewater Center 50 miler, you did the Mount Mitchell Heartbreaker 50 miler, then you got to the Massanutten 100. But what we have learned in just running ultras ourselves is that we tend to take something from that experience. We have an idea of how an ultra is going to play itself out. It never goes like we have, pigeoned it in our head. Instead, there's things that tend to go a little bit awry. So did you learn anything at the Hydro 50K that you then took forward to your next race? Or did you come out of that race thinking, I'm never going to do another ultra again because the medals just are not worth it?
Well, I got to admit, the medal is cooler than the other ones that I had. So that part was a success. But just some things that I learned on that race was I tried to eat. I mean, I was eating granola bars and like and these like little fruit snacks that like these fruit bars that my daughter had. And it just like, I was eating the same thing over and over and over and over again. And I was just not having it at the end of that race. So that was the big thing that I learned is that I got to play a little bit with the nutrition stuff and not kind of get pigeonholed into one thing. And especially try to have some stuff that's a little bit easier on the stomach instead of just all solid food.
So how did you decide to go the next distance? Like what made you sign up for your next 50 miler?
Especially after cramping and everything at the other one.
I mean,
yeah. Most of the time I just like, I had an itch for it. I wanted to keep going. I enjoyed the challenge. And a lot of it was just, I would kind of have a conversation with my wife and say, hey, like, do you think I could do that? Or do you think I could do this? And most of the time she's just like, yeah, like, I'm sure you can do it. And a lot of times that takes me by surprise. I'm like, oh, like, you think I can do it? Maybe I don't have enough, maybe I don't believe in myself enough, but I'm glad you do. And now you just gave me everything that I need to sign up for the next one. So the next one was a local race at the Whitewater Center here in Charlotte. And it's an awesome place. Another super crew friendly race. It's loops. It was hot, but they had a lot of shade. It was well supported. And yeah, they offered a 50K as well, but I didn't want to do another 50K. I'm not as ambitious as some other people are. I like the ladder, I like to go 50K, 50 miler. I did skip 100K, but yeah, I like to climb up the ladder a little bit. I'm a 5K, half marathon. I gotta get some belief in myself as I go up. So
is that, so let's pause there for a second or come back to it, I guess maybe is a better way of saying that. You obviously aren't going to run an ultra. You're not going to, so let me rephrase that. You're not going to put in the type of training that you've had to do for your 50 milers even. And that is going to be because you want to get a medal. So what possesses you? Is it because that you doubted yourself and that other people believe in you, and that's kind of like what propels you to kind of give it a shot? Like, where does that drive to say, I really want to do this? Because, when you first started in running, it was because you were doing this to honor your cousin. Then you did it with a half marathon because of a friend of yours, right? It was a way of encouraging each other to do a half marathon. So where does the drive for yourself to get up early mornings to train for an ultra, which is a lot of work?
That's a pretty tough question. I think, and I don't know if I've really kind of shaken that out completely in my head, but I do love the personal challenge, and I love that it really builds discipline when you have to show up every single day. This stuff is not easy to do. You got to train a lot, and to get up early before work, I just put in those long runs on the weekends. I enjoyed the discipline building of showing up for myself every single day and just building slowly. And then ultimately we'll come to a race. That's a big challenge. I love talking about it. And, most of the time we're like, you're crazy for trying to do this stuff. But yeah, I love the personal challenge of it. And that's kind of where it's just built from primarily.
That's cool. So in your post, and I'm jumping intentionally here, in your post that you put regarding your Whitewater Center that I read, because again, you and I talked before the show that you don't post a lot on social media. So I was easily able to find your second most recent post was from October of 2024, right? But you ran the Whitewater 50 miler and it was 6 months after the Hydra 50K. But according to that post, you said you never expected to run something that long after your experience at the Hydra. So you ended up running this race for some reason. You got in there, and you kind of alluded to the fact that you were going to have bigger plans in 2025. So at some point from I'm going to die at the Hydra, I'm cramping up and everything, you decided that you wanted to just go for it and to move beyond maybe going to 400. So at what point did you decide to pursue the 100-mile distance? And is that where the Whitewater and the Mount Mitchell came in to kind of get you to that point? Or were you actually saying, I just want to try the 50 miler and see how it goes?
So I think a lot of people can relate to this when I say that that day after a race, or even the next day, when you are just decimated from the race, you don't know if, like, that might be it. That might be it for me. This is worth it because I'm miserable. I can't move my legs. Everything just feels like I just got hit by a truck. And then you start to recover. And then you look back on the experience that you had. You look back on the relationships that you made there, the challenges that you overcame. And it's like, I love that. I love that. I love those people that I met. I love being able to push through that really challenging time. And it's like, maybe I could do something more. Maybe I could go a little farther. So that's where it kind of builds into the 50 miler. But I felt like I knew after the Whitewater Center that feeling was coming, where I would be ready and so maybe in a couple days or a week to do something bigger. But I also have one pretty big influence in my ultra running, in just getting into ultras. And my brother-in-law, Brandon, shout out to Brandon. He's an animal. He lives in Colorado Springs, and I got an opportunity last year to crew for him at the Ouray 100. And I don't know if you guys have heard much about the Ouray, but it is, I can't even believe so I went out there. I flew out to Denver. We drove out to Ouray, and we approached this town, and I am just looking around at these mountains surrounding me, and I'm like, where is the race? Because you can't run on any of it. It's like, it is just skyscraper mountains completely surrounding the town. It is the most beautiful place that I've ever seen. And he's like, oh yeah, we're going up there, and we're going up there and there. I'm like, this is insane. This is insane. And this is 100 miles. And so we had a blast out there. It was an awesome time. And I got to meet some super cool people there. And seeing people do that race, that let me see that, okay, like literally anything is possible. If people can finish this race, then I can do 100 miles. I could do, any distance, because this is literally insane. I mean, they're like, they can't even run any of it. You can't even run any of it. You can't even run downhill. It's like the craziest place that I've ever seen. So that experience, it made me feel like anything was possible. So shout out to Brandon. You're an incredible experience.
I think that's great. And I think you brought up a good point in crewing. I don't know if you got the pace at all on there, but like crewing and pacing, I think every ultra runner, if you're looking to move up in distance, if you get a chance to crew that distance, I think it would be great. It's a great experience. Just because you see what goes into it, what they need to do, and you actually see the type of people who are running. Well, some of those people are running it. I think I could run it too. Kind of gives you a little bit more confidence going into it. Again, trying not to judge a book by its cover, but because I had just run Covadonga, I never crewed it, and I crewed it this year, and it was a totally different experience. And it was, from one on my side, I was like, oh my God, I don't say thank you enough to my crew chief with my wife. And then the other side was like, man, it's really cool, the community you get to see on the crew side itself too. So I think it would be a great experience for anybody that's looking to crew or looking to move up in distance, would be to crew somebody doing that distance.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think you're spot on. And shout out to Brandon on that, because Ouray is a brutal race. It has some serious elevation gain and loss. And I'm sure when he was pacing you at the Massanutten, he thought, you're a chump. So anyhow, we'll just keep that in home, right? But so then you decided, you came off the Whitewater 50 miler, and I believe shortly thereafter you opted to get a coach. Is that right? Like in December?
Yeah.
Now, and I'll let you tell the story here, but is that because you decided you were going to train for 100, or is it because you were training for your next 50 miler?
So it was because I wanted to do the 100. And Brandon is like intertwined in all of this. So when I was crewing Brandon in Ouray, he introduced me to a coach that he used to have, and her name was Ann Tisdale, and she is an absolute savage. She's incredible. She just won the Arizona Monster 300, first place female, and finished second at Moab. But when I met her, I didn't know any of that. She was just this kind ultra runner that just loved the experience. And Brandon introduced me to her, and I'm like, I don't know anything about running 100 milers, and I don't know any other coaches. You're my only option. And like, luckily she was gracious enough to bring me on. But I finished the 50 miler at the Whitewater Center. reached out to her. She said she'd be super happy to coach me. My goal was to run a 100-mile race, and I didn't really have any plans at the time to do the Mount Mitchell Heartbreaker 50-miler. That was just a training run, essentially, to prep me for a mountain race. So, but yeah, I've been working with Ann since early December. Yeah.
So take us to your training run then. So Ann puts on this
a training run,
right? The Mount Mitchell Heartbreaker 50-miler. And for those that don't know it, I have some notes on it. It is a 50-mile race here in North Carolina that has over 10,000 feet of gain. Now, because of Hurricane Helene, they did alternate the course this year, but it still, with the new course, still has that 10,000 feet. You just don't go up to Mount Mitchell. So the joke inside the groups was that we're just going to call it the Heartbreaker 50-miler, but
yeah.
Troy finished this race in 11 hours, 11 minutes, 21 seconds, and in 21st place out of 106 finishers. I am imagining that when you got done with the race, you had a very strong performance and you were riding high. So what went so well with this race?
Well, I realized that I'm pretty solid for about 45 miles. Honestly, like my first coaching call after that race, get on with Ann, and I'm like, Ann, I literally can't think of one thing that I would do differently from this race. Nutrition was dialed in, pacing was perfect. I was doing the climb strong. I had like my second or third fastest mile was like mile 46 or something like that. So I'm like, I paced it well, I managed the heat well, and I'm feeling great. I thought that time was awesome. I was going for 12 hours and I was like super happy with that. I was racing people at the end of the race, which one of the coolest feelings, especially from going from the Hydra 50K, where the only thing that I'm racing is just the amount of miles left on my watch and how much time I have left to deal with the cramping. So I'm racing people at the end of this. The race couldn't have gone any better. It was an absolutely awesome race.
So did you take anything from that? And like, did you then, because you were on such a high, make any assumptions for the Massanutten 100
Oh, I probably buried myself because I did so well at that 50-miler. Like 11 hours. Okay. This is good. So,
did a sub 24-hour finish.
I mean, yeah, and it had 10,000 feet over 50 miles. Massanutten is like 18,000 feet over 100 miles, so it's a little less. I got
the deal.
Yeah, I mean, I should be feeling great. Be feeling great, but 45 miles is about as far as I went. Feeling really good on that 50-miler, but yeah, I couldn't have done any different at Massanutten. Holy smokes.
So our intent was to talk about Massanutten, right? But we wanted to kind of show this ladder, if you will, of your progressions to different distances. And because we knew from everything we kind of stalked of your Strava history, your brief social media history, that the Mount Mitchell Heartbreaker 50-miler was a huge race for you, like from a positive, confidence standpoint, everything about it. But it gets us to the Massanutten 100, and that's kind of was the entire trajectory of where you were going. And so again, one more course description for those who like these. If you hate them, I'm sorry, I love them. So the course description for the Massanutten 100, it's a challenging 100-mile ultra over demanding rocky course in the Massanutten Mountains that is in Shenandoah Valley. It's in Virginia. According to the website, the climbs are not huge. They're not like Uray, but they are rugged and technical. Total elevation gain over the course is 18,500 feet. The course is 2 different loops and a figure 8 with a larger loop of about 70 miles and a smaller loop for another 30, which makes it, I think, pretty challenging for that first 70-mile loop and then go out on the next 30. There are 15 aid stations, and the race has a 36-hour cutoff due to the technical nature of it. There were 94 finishers and 63 DNFs. Troy finished this race in 34 hours, 29 minutes, and 5 seconds. Now, he told you what he thought he was going to hit. Here is the one thing to note, though, and this is what we're going to start with. According to his post on Instagram, as he wrapped up this race, he was at mile 47 in 12 hours. So this race had 2 sides to it, 2 stories, if you will. So let's talk about the first half. The first 12, I mean, to do 47 miles on this course in 12 hours is a really solid performance.
Yeah.
So what
Absolutely.
went so well on the first half? And then I guess we'll get to the back half. Let's start with the first half before things started to fall apart.
Yeah, so one thing that I love to do in races, and one thing that I've used a lot in my coaching, in my training, is just the talk test. So it lets me judge what my effort level is. And so I'm a social person. When I get out on the trail, I'm trying to make friends, I'm talking to people. And so I can judge my effort level based on what kind of conversation I'm able to have with somebody. So this is something that Ann taught me. Just, are you able to have complete sentences without getting short of breath? And so I'm meeting people out on the trail and I'm just talking to them. And that's kind of how I'm judging my effort level. And I was probably going a hair faster than I probably should have. But, I get talking to people. We're trying to keep up with each other. And it just, I can kind of space out and, just kind of get lost in conversation. But yeah, I mean, the first half went really good. I mean, other than the fact that they didn't disclose there were going to be like any water crossings in the race. There were 2 water crossings within the first 3 miles. They got a lot of rain in the week leading up to the race. So, we were changing shoes all the time, changing socks. I was really making an effort to just take care of my feet, to manage my hydration and nutrition really well. And I am sure that I changed my shoes more than anybody else that ran the race, just because we had like 3 pairs of shoes and we're cycling them quick. My brother, he came down and crewed the race. We had a boot dryer. I'm drying my shoes out in between each aid station. And I'm doing everything that I can to keep my feet dry. And that made a really big, if I didn't do that, I don't think I would have finished the race, because I literally didn't have one blister the entire race. So, but the first half of the race, it's going really smooth. I'm hitting my nutrition every half an hour. I'm taking the gel. I'm having, food at the aid station. Hydration's going really good. It was a little hotter than I was expecting, but I had an ice bandana. I was staying really cool. I got to one aid station and my wife was like, "You want to change your shirt? Like, your shirt is soaked." And I'm like, this ice bandana I'm freezing. It's just, I'm soaked like from head to toe. And I couldn't have felt better, because that was a massive piece of gear that I had up there that really helped things along. So yeah, I was staying cool, eating, hydrating, and the race was just going nice and smooth. The easiest, I think the first half of the course was easier on a technicality, like in terms of the technicality of the trail. But yeah, I think we're just going really good. And then mile 47. So
So do you start on the 70-mile loop first and then go to the 30-mile loop? Okay.
yeah.
That doesn't sound like fun either. I don't know which would be worse. I don't know which one would be worse, actually.
Yeah, I didn't really think of it as like 2 different loops. You only hit one aid station 2 times where they cross over, but it doesn't really feel like a loop, because you're not hitting the same trail more than once, so but it is definitely shaped like that. The course is.
Before we get into the second half, so you're in North Carolina, right? So, and that's pretty flat. Did you pick this race because it was mountainous, or did this just happen to be a race that was there and then you saw that it was mountainous and then you had to adjust your training that way?
So kind of bringing it back to Brandon and Ure, I got like all about trying to do a mountainous race because I'd have to go to Ure. Now, we don't have anything to that extent on the East Coast, but I wanted a mountainous race. I wanted it to be in a certain time of year. There were like all these criteria where I'm like searching for my first dream 100-miler, and it just like hit all the criteria. I mean, it was a Western States qualifier, so I'm like, yeah, if I stick with this, I might as well get a ticket while I'm at it. So I got one ticket. So Jeff, I hate to break
it only takes one, man. It only takes one. And if you get in above me, I'll kill you. So at what point did the wheels fall off, and why do you think they did?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple reasons why it did. And I hate to say it, but like when I get some time goals stuck in my head, sometimes it kind of makes me go outside of my capability and where I should be at in order to just push a little harder than I was, than I probably should have been. And my realistic time goal for this race was 28 hours. And I knew that I was well ahead of that at the halfway mark. But I always said, like, there's a 1% chance that I could do this race in 24 hours. So I'm just going to run as good as I can and try to feel as good as I can and fuel and hydrate as best I can along the way. And maybe that 1% will show up, but maybe it won't. And I probably had that stuck in my head a lot more than I should have. And I'm not realistically, I went an hour or two faster on the first half than I realistically probably should have been going. But I had built a lot of confidence from the Heartbreaker race, and I'm like, man, I think I'm capable of this. And so I got pushing, and we're working our way through the first half of the race, and slowly my drink mix just started not sitting really well. My gel started not sitting really well. And I really should have taken some other lessons that I learned in some other races and had more variation in the things that I was eating. I was pretty much having 2 different kinds of gels every half an hour, just on repeat. And I was eating aid station food, but the solid food wasn't a big part of my on-course nutrition. And I think that I would have been better off kind of mixing a little bit of that in along the way instead of just dumping the same gels into my body over and over again. So I think my body was just kind of getting tired of those things. And when my stomach started to not feel that great around that 47, 50-mile mark, just kind of started to go like downhill from there. Started slowing down, and I was able to pick up Brandon as my first pacer at mile 56, and this was probably at like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Yeah, maybe like 7 o'clock at night. And I talked to him, and I just said, dude, things are kind of starting to turn. They aren't what they were 10 miles ago. Let me get out there. I kind of want to just keep an eye on my stomach and how I'm feeling. I want to manage this the best I can. So just let me lead. Just follow me. Just stick with me. We'll talk. Ask me how I'm doing. Whatever. But just kind of hang with me. And I was moving so slow, and every time that we got to a climb, I really started to overheat like pretty quickly. Even though it was getting into the night, I could tell, I don't know if my heart rate was getting up, but I just started getting like really hot. And between the overheating and then my stomach starting to turn, I started not being able to hold anything down. And that was I had not dealt with that during another race before. And I was kind of starting to get flashbacks because Brandon dealt with a lot of that in his race at Uray. So, and we had trouble overcoming that in his race. And so we didn't really know exactly how to problem solve through this. But the only thing that kept going through my head during all of this is on my last coaching call before the race, Anna would just say, there is almost no problem that you can encounter during this race that you cannot overcome. And just take your time, solve problems, and trust your crew, and just keep working. Don't stop trying to solve problems when obstacles come, because they're going to come. And I started having them, I started not being able to hold food down around, in that next section. And we were doing some climbs, and one time Brandon knew that, I was like barely walking, and Brandon just looks at me and he goes, Troy, just let me see your pack. Let me see what you got in your pack. I'm going to see if I can find anything that can help turn this around, settle your stomach, whatever. I took my pack off and I handed it to him, and I just laid right down on the trail on the side of this mountain. I got my eyes closed. I probably slept for a couple minutes. I was not planning on sleeping, but he just like looking through my pack. I had no energy. Because I couldn't keep anything down before. He keeps putting stuff in my hand. I don't even have enough energy to like grab onto it. And all I hear is just runners passing me. And they're like, is he okay? Is he okay? And Brandon's like, I'll figure it out, because he's been there. He knows what's going on. We'll be okay. We'll be okay. And he hands me this ginger chew, and he's like, these will settle your stomach. It's good for you, and if you chew on it, you kind of get a like slow drip of some calories or whatever, but it'll just be something to kind of trick your body into thinking that you're eating. He handed it to me, and I had enough energy to open it up and put it in my mouth. And I tell you, this must have been the spiciest ginger chew that exists. I got up about 5 seconds later, and I just immediately threw up. I'm like, and we looking back on that moment, I don't know how I was going to stand up again because I was just so exhausted. If he didn't hand that to me and I didn't have to get up to throw up, I don't know how I was going to get back up. But I stood up. Brandon's like, all right, you're up. We're moving. He's like, just put the pack on and we're going to start walking. So I like death marched for the next 4 or 5 miles to an aid nation at like miles 68 or something, and it was like a 9 or 10 mile section, and it took us like over 8 hours or something, like some wild number to get to the next aid station. I mean, we were doing like 35, 40, 45-minute mile on that, and I was just barely moving. And by this time, it was the middle of the night. We get to the aid station, and I just look at my wife, and God bless her. She's a trooper. I just look at her, and I'm like, everything is wrong. Everything. We can't get anything right. I have no energy. I'm like, we're changing the nutrition plan. We're changing the hydration plan. I'm like, I'm going to need some kind of broth or soup. I need some coffee. I need some electrolytes. I got to get something back in my system. This is how we're changing my nutrition and hydration that I want in my pack. Can you just take care of that? I'm going to take a nap. And most people don't sleep in 100-mile races. And everybody leading up to this race, they're like, do you think you're going to take a nap? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to take a nap. I took 3 naps during this race. That one was about 15 minutes long, and she prepped all of my stuff, and I wake up, I'm eating the soup, I'm drinking the coffee, I'm pounding some Pedialyte, I'm taking anti-nausea medicine. I had such a massive hole to pull myself out of that, like, we were throwing everything that we could at this. And the aid station captain there said, if you take this soup, this is the magic soup. This is the good stuff. And he was right. He was right. We spent about an hour at that aid station kind of getting prepped to get back out on the course. And he's like, eat the soup and don't die in the chair. So he got me back out on the course. And within a half an hour of being back out on the trail, I felt like all those issues that I was having were completely gone. I felt great. I had energy. I had like 2 cups of coffee there, all of these calories, and we just like didn't give up on eating and on drinking and on getting electrolytes in and on we just didn't give up on any of that stuff. Even if I was getting sick, not able to hold anything down, I was just immediately eating and drinking again, even if I didn't want to. And that was, that was probably the best thing that I could have done, just to kind of keep my head above water until we were able to solve the other problems in terms of like caloric intake and electrolytes. We got those things fixed, and then yeah, I didn't move a whole lot faster in the second half, but I was moving. So,
I mean, there's so many things I want to talk about.
Yeah, no, I think it was great.
So when you were nauseous and your heart rate was increasing going up the mountains, you said that your brother-in-law also experienced that as well. So I'm not saying this is what it is, but when you talked about the solution of what you did at the next couple aid stations with the chicken soup or whatever, and the broth and the electrolytes and the hydration, you kept mentioning hydration all the time. Now, before that, you were talking about nutrition was going so well, but your solution seemed to be very hydration based. And what I have found is that when you are dehydrated or borderline dehydrated, your heart rate is spiking just any time there's effort taking place. Like if you're going up the side of a mountain and your heart rate is out of control, more than likely you are dealing with some dehydration. And the reason I thought that is because you loved your ice bandana and how cool you felt when it was hot. And what fools people is that they're not hot and they're sweating and the ice bandana fools them, so they're not taking the same level of hydration. So even though you're hitting your carbs every 30 minutes like you were, I'm wondering, and I definitely could be wrong, is if your hydration quantity that you probably should have been targeting per hour wasn't where it needed to be, that put you in that hole initially. It's just a guess.
Yeah. On both the fluids and the sodium side.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there is this video of that somebody took at me at like aid station at like mile like 30, and my wife, her job with the crew team was to fill my pack, redo my water, get my soft flasks going. Like that was her job. And each of the first 3 crewable aid stations, she would take off my pack and be like, "Troy, you probably need to be drinking a little bit more water. You probably need to be."
Yeah, exactly. I
felt like I was having the same amount of fluids that I was having in all of my training and in my races leading. I felt like I was drinking enough. So you're probably spot on, Jeff. Like
no, your wife told you that you were not. So that's not even about me being right. Your wife told you this. So you just didn't listen to her. That's the reason. And you fooled yourself into thinking that you were not needing as much hydration because of that cooling bandana. And so I love ice bandanas. I think they are a solid tip for a lot of people to get through hot races. But when our body is cooler, we don't feel like we need to drink as much, and that's a mistake.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely. I'm sure it made it was fun for a bit. I mean, one time I was so confident that I was having everything that I needed. One time when she said like, "Hey, like you're not drinking enough," and I literally like looked up like this. I said, "Babe, I am doing everything that I can to have enough water. I promise I'm doing the best." And I kind of like rolled my, so confident that I was doing it right. I mean, but I would get in the station and it'd be like a third full, a half full, but
when we get done with our recording today for this show, you go ahead and let your wife know that Steve and Jeff said she was right.
Yep, 100%.
She's gonna be very glad to hear that.
Right?
Yeah.
Because what you did at that last aid station before you headed back out was just replace all the electrolytes. That's why the soup was the magic soup, was because it had probably a ton of sodium in it, and that just kicked you right back into gear, and that's what you were missing. So, and also taking that 15-minute nap also helped you like regulate your body a little bit, so it got back down. And that's what I found too, Jeff, is my heart rate kind of spikes when I'm low on sodium. So I know as soon as that happens, I take some caplets, I'm ready, and like get that dialed back in.
Well, it was my first 100-miler.
Hey man, we still love you. But
Yeah,
our job is to kind of walk through the story to kind of see if there's things. There's a learning opportunity for us and everyone else, because we both experienced it, and many people that we work with have experienced that as well. And so it just seems to be one of the symptoms of that problem. And over the years and over the time that you do more of these races, you begin to recognize what these symptoms actually mean. And so, oh, that's the problem, and I didn't realize the problem. And so, yes. Your wife is right, and so kudos for her, and I think it's great. But as you said, you felt fully energized coming out of this around mile 60 something at this point after having your nap and everything. Still got at least 30 miles to go. At what point in this, I mean, let me stop there. I think it's great that you did not doubt yourself, which is astounding for a lot of people, particularly your first 100. Like, I'm surprised you did not DNF, to be honest with you. The way you just described it, like, you had a lot of the cards stacked against you. You had every reason to quit when you're vomiting and you're taking naps for the second and third times, which you told everybody you weren't going to take a nap. Like, that would just be a mental job, right? Because of the pressure. And so the fact that you didn't quit is incredible. But at what point did you realize you were going to finish?
Well, probably after I started feeling better coming out of that aid station. So for better or for worse, I banked a lot of time early in the race because I ran pretty well for the first 50 miles. So, I mean, we did some quick trail math and I'm like, okay, I could pretty much hit like 30-minute miles from here on out and still get to the finish line. And quitting was something that I just really didn't want to enter into the equation. When Ann tells me stuff like, there is no problem that is unsolvable, other than like getting injured or something like that, you can overcome a problem. And luckily, with this race, it was a pretty generous time. Like, they gave me 36 hours to do it. So we had enough time to solve problems. And I've just listened to way too many podcasts about people just say, hey, I felt like garbage and we did this and this and this. And I came back and, I'm sure there have been people on this podcast that have talked about that. And I knew that it was possible. And one big thing that I talked with my crew about before the race is I just said, hey, listen, these are my criteria for dropping out of the race. And unless we're encountering those criteria, then there is no talk about quitting this race. For better or for worse, you're with me for 36 hours. So we're going to try to figure it out. And we'll keep trying some different things. If they work, they work. If they don't, they don't. As long as I'm within the time cutoff, my A goal is to finish the race. And my B goal, 28 hours. As soon as I had all those issues, I was like, oop, 28 hours, that's out the window. Luckily, I was able to shift my mindset pretty quickly and set that aside and just say, okay, we just got to finish. 36 hours, that's my new time goal. And because my crew never talked about having me withdraw from the race, they were so supportive and we were just trying different things. And I told one of my pacers, I was like, dude, I plan on running with you from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the morning. And he didn't start pacing, shout out to Kyle, until like 8 o'clock in the morning. Getting into the rhythm. You're not going to see the light of day. 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, maybe 4 o'clock. We're running through the night. Don't plan on get some sleep beforehand. The plan went so far off that like everybody had to be flexible with it. And, we just kind of prepping them to not let the doubt and the idea of quitting enter my mind. It didn't really come into play, even though I was having those problems. And a lot of it had to do with the support that I had from my crew. So.
Yeah, I think that was a great discussion to have with your crew beforehand, because not a lot of people do that. And then sometimes the crew can talk a runner out of it by saying, like, one, you don't look very good, and I think it's time to pack it in. So it's advisable to have those kind of discussions with your crew beforehand, because you are going to suffer a little bit. And if they're not used to seeing you suffer, then that may have them pull the cord a little bit, throw in the towel a little bit sooner than is necessary. And what I tell my athletes, and I hate that I tell my athletes this because then I have to practice it too, is like the aid station captain said, don't die in the chair. Like, so if there's time left on the clock and you could still move, you're not injured, then move. Because who knows if you're going to rebound. If you don't, and a sweeper shows up, then you know you've put your best effort forward. It's completely different than the doubt that if you quit at an aid station and then later on, like a week down the road, you're like, man, I don't know if I should have quit at that aid station. But if you're moving and a sweeper catches you, you put your best effort in. That's kind of what I expect all my athletes. Which sucks, because then anytime I hit a cutoff, I'd have to go myself.
Yeah. There were a couple other things that kind of helped me keep moving forward. The first thing is that, and I know I talked about this in like the questionnaire that you guys sent to me, but having the support of my wife is super important to me. And all of this running, all of this training that I have to do to prep for this race, it takes a lot of time away from my family. I'll wake up on a Saturday morning and I got a 4-hour run. I got a 6-hour run. I got, this thing that I have to do in order to achieve this goal that is really just for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, my daughter is 5 years old, and each hour that I lose spending with her on a weekend morning, I need to make the most of that time that I'm taking away from being together with her. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know if I would do another 100-mile race, because honestly, it kind of kills me to wake up on Saturdays and to take that time away from them. And it was just, it was 6 months. It was from December until May, where I'm just taking little pieces here and there from this goal that is about me, essentially. And I didn't know if I wanted to do that again. So the way that I looked at it is I signed up for the race. I got the coach. I'm putting in the time, and finishing this race is super important to me because of the sacrifices that not only I've had to make, but that everybody else has had to make in order to support this goal. I had family that came down from New York to crew me for this race. People traveled. I would have been hurting for a while if I didn't get to the finish line of this race, knowing all of the support and the time that everybody else has put in for this race. So that's going through my head, and not finishing, that was a long ways away from my frame of view. So
no, I think that's great. That's an amazing way to approach it.
sure.
They would have loved you anyway.
Yeah.
They probably wouldn't.
Just so you know, they would have loved you anyway. So you eventually cross the finish line. As you see the line ahead of you, and you're like, it's in sight. And I'm sure if you had a pacer at this point, they kind of peeled away anyway. So when you see this line ahead, the line ahead of you, what went through your mind?
So I had imagined this for a while, and usually when I'm imagining this, I am just bawling as I cross the finish line. And this race was no different. Still 100 yards approaching the finish line, and I had imagined doing two things at the finish line. I imagined crying, and I imagined just screaming at the top of my lungs, like, let's go. And I got to the finish line. I definitely cried the whole time. And I looked at on this video of me crossing the finish line, and the let's go that I had imagined being so loud, I was like barely getting it out. I think yeah. So it was a pretty incredible moment, and just kind of bringing all of that training and the sacrifice together and getting to the finish line. It was one of the coolest moments of my life. Getting there, I would say without a shadow of a doubt.
That's
awesome.
Yeah, that is fantastic. So we would be remiss to not talk about training. Like you spent a lot of time getting ready for it. Like you said, you went from December with a coach all the way through this race. Like you dedicated and sacrificed a lot of your time with that intent. We do want to talk about some of the things that maybe your coach kind of helped you with, but you gave us a nugget earlier that I'm going to circle back to just to kind of have you explain it again, because you mentioned that she taught you to do a talk test so that you could gauge your effort. That's a really cool technique to understand what your RPE
Yeah.
is, or your rate of perceived effort, right? And so if you could you describe it in your words what the talk test is?
Yeah, so it's a simple way to just manage your effort. So all of my training leading up was go before I got a coach was what's my pace, what's my heart rate, and I met with Ann and she's like, throw that stuff out the window, get it off
Mhm.
your watch. Because when you're
Love
running
that.
up mountains, when you're going through different kinds of terrain, she goes, your heart rate's going to be way off. It's going to be hot. It's going to be cold. Your pace is going to be off. You're running over rocks, running through streams, all this stuff. She goes, throw it out the window. Everything is off of rate of perceived exertion. And a way that she taught me to measure that is just what kind of sentences am I able to put together? If I'm doing like a threshold run, maybe I can do 5 or 6 words, maybe one sentence. Or if I'm doing an easy run, if I'm doing a RPE 4 or 5, a recovery run, I should be able to pretty much be talking the whole time without getting out of breath. Or if you're doing like interval work, you should pretty much not be able to talk. The only words you should be able to say are the magic 4-letter words that just describe everything that you're feeling during an interval work or like a VO2 max work.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a way to gauge how hard you're working based on how much you're able to talk.
Yeah. So now, I think, Jeff, I think you do the same thing that I do. One of the first things I have with an athlete is exactly that, as the talk test. Put them on a treadmill. They start at one where you can just hang out all day long, walk all day long, and then you increase the treadmill by 1 or 2 miles per hour, and then just walk your way through, like you said, how well are you talking at each level? And then you do that until you can't do that anymore, and you're cursing everybody.
Yeah.
And then you kind of build your own RPE matrix of how you feel and kind of where your heart rate is. So when you have a prescribed workout, you know where you should be around. Yeah, I love rate of perceived exertion. That's kind of been my go-to. I was a big heart rate, but then when I found rate of perceived exertion, I think that's like magic to me.
Yeah, I don't do the treadmill test, though I probably should for the talk test. But
Yeah,
I
it's
actually,
one of the first
yeah,
things I do.
I will do. I give all mine an RPE guide and kind of walk through what
Yeah.
that sounds like, what your breathing should be like, what your conversation could look like throughout the course of each of those effort levels. And so I use what you see online, but I also use my own language as well to kind of redefine it so that they can understand this is how you know if you're in this effort zone. And I use very similar things. Like if it's an RPE of 9, 10 or whatever it is, then you expect to be cussing me out when you're done and maybe even vomiting. And so I explain all that, and I spend generally the first 4 weeks with my runners to kind of walk through this RPE building relationship and explaining it. And then I'll throw a lactate threshold test early on so that they can get an idea of what I'm looking at here. And then I use that and we back down. Like, okay, so here was what you were able to sustain, and now let's kind of play through it. And so there are different ways to get to it. But ultimately, Troy, to your point, is if we could get runners to understand RPE and understand these different levels of intensity or effort level, and because it's really the goal that helps them become faster runners, fitter runners, and more efficient runners. And so I think if we could move out of the gray zone that Steve talks about sometimes in his own post, right? That every run does not have to be the same run, and every run doesn't have to be faster than the last. You just need to kind of be able to toggle between these different zones. And I think it's important that people can do that. So also on the note of training, what is the biggest thing that Ann had you work on?
Probably the biggest thing was nutrition. Just on my long runs and runs over an hour and a half, I'm eating. I'm training my stomach to be able to get in a certain amount of carbs, amount of calories, just kind of getting that stuff scheduled out and being a lot more intentional with the food and with the hydration as well. That we talked about that a lot, and trying a lot of different things too. So yeah, she hammered that home.
So what's the go-to nutrition and hydration that you use now?
Well, I probably would give you a different answer now than I would before the race. Before the race, I was pretty much locked in on precision hydration gels, the 30-gram gels, and the Science and Sport Beta Fuel 40 gram carb gels. I love those. I could probably go back to having them now at certain points of the race. They were not great, but the one thing that we transitioned a lot to kind of in the later parts of the race was I was eating a lot of Uncrustables, and they were a lot of carbs, a lot of calories, a pretty good amount of sodium. And another big thing that they really helped with is because it's a sandwich, they're kind of a little dry. It was forcing me to drink more water just to get that. So I'm like doing all of these things at once, I'm like choking down a sandwich, but I'm drinking a lot of water too. So that we transitioned to that. I pretty much had the Uncrustables for like the last 40 miles of the race. And I loved it. I mean, it tastes great too, like being a kid all over again.
Listen, I love a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in a race. I have had a multiple, at least 2 of the hundreds I've had over 10 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches over the course of a race.
Yeah, I mean, I probably was pretty close to having 10. What's that thing?
So mine's soft pretzels. I've had about that many in a 100-mile race probably.
But I'm not eating gels during that time. So I end up I quarter them and I have them in a bag and I eat half of it as I go. And I just keep eating it as my food. And so that's what I'm sustaining with. It has an added bonus of protein too, which kind of helps out just a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Steve, you got any other training questions you're curious about?
I think you hit it a little bit, but like, how did you train for that elevation, especially being flat? So did you get up there or did you have to do some treadmill or stepper or anything like that?
Yeah. I did most of my vert session just on a treadmill. Got an old treadmill, it could go up to 10 degrees or 10%. So I just pounded at 10%. I did a little jogging at that, did a little power hiking, tried to kind of mix that up a little bit. But even at the Whitewater Center, we couldn't, even the steepest trails there, we couldn't get the amount of gain that I needed that was related to Massanutten there. So I did most of my vert sessions on a treadmill. So, but that was a big reason why I wanted to do the Heartbreaker, because I had no experience doing long climbs. So that race gave me some exposure, and there was like a 3,000, one or two, I think there was 3,000 foot climbs in the Heartbreaker, and Massanutten, the biggest climb is only like 1,800 feet. So that was a big reason why we picked that race leading up to it, so that I could get some exposure to long technical climbs. And I thought that race went pretty good, so I'm glad that we did 10.
No, I think that's great. I think it's smart.
When you debriefed the race with your coach afterwards, and as you began to look for the future races, and we're going to talk about what you've got coming up in just a second, because we know that you're still going to pursue future hundreds, right? At least that's the idea. What is one thing that you guys identified that you were going to work on differently?
So the biggest thing is that I didn't do really any trail runs at a 4 RPE. All of my long runs that I did, the only trail runs that I did were my long runs, because I had to drive to the Whitewater Center to do those on the trail. So, and all of those were like 5 or 6 RPE. So all of the trail experience that I had leading up to that was at a faster pace. So the biggest thing that we will probably do moving forward, or that I will be more intentional about, is getting on the trails and working at a lower RPE so that I know what a 13-minute mile feels like. So because I don't really run a 13-minute mile. Even if I'm on the trail, a long run at a 6 RPE, I mean, I'll go with a 10, 10:30, maybe an 11-minute mile. Or if I'm doing a recovery run around my house, it's 10, 10:30. So I had all this experience doing like 10:30s, 11-minute miles, but I didn't really have anything on a trail at a 4 RPE. So that's the biggest thing that we'll probably incorporate moving forward. Just doing some really easy runs on trail.
That's awesome. So I mentioned upcoming, you are on the wait list for the Rim to River 100. and you have not gotten into that, I looked at the wait list before the recording night. You've got a long way to go to get on that. And so if you don't make it in Rim to River, you have your backup plan is to run the Grindstone 100K, which is also a pretty challenging 100K, excuse me, here on the East Coast. For those who don't know, it's a UTMB qualifier, I believe, it's part of theirs as well. And then you've got the Coldwater 50K and then a Kiowa Marathon is what you're looking at to close out your year. Does that pretty much sum up what you got coming up?
Oh, Jeff, I have been buried in ultra sign up for the last week and a half. So I'm seeing stuff all over the place. I know my chances for Rim to River are pretty slim. I got like 50 spots I got to move in order to get there. I'm not holding my breath that I'm going to get in. So right now, it has all changed since I said that. So my backup plan is there's a local 100-miler. I'm sure you've heard of it, Jeff, the Uwari 100. It is pretty much the same time as Rim to River. So I don't get into Rim to River. I'm just going to switch to Uwari, which is, I kind of don't think it's going to sell out before I get there. So what do you know about Uwari, Jeff? That was a really big reaction.
Oh my God. It's rough, man. What I would say about the Uwari real quick is that you should, if you're considering it, and even if you don't get in it, or excuse me, even if you don't do that, but you're going to do Rim to River, whatever, Uwari does a really cool thing. They have free training runs 4 times a year. You can go on their website to look them up, and people go out there and they do one of the 20-mile loops. And so I highly recommend you do that and give it a shot. Even if you just use it as a training for the Rim to River or Grindstone or something else, because it's free opportunity to be on a very technical trail that that's out there. They even do one of them at night.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like an hour and a half from my house. So I definitely intend on getting out there and doing that. I think that's the most likely next big race that I'll be doing. So unless the wait list really starts moving on Rim to River, I would love to do Rim to River. So my coach is local to the Rim to River, so I would love to. I've only met her one time, so I'd like to get out there and, meet her. And the race environment just looks pretty cool. I'm still trying to fine tune my criteria for why I will pick a race. And I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about that. Like, how do you pick what race you're going to do next? Jeff, other than it's just a Western States qualifier.
That's it.
Is that it?
So I have one goal, and that's to run Western States. So my entire calendar is going to be driven off of finding a qualifier that I'm going to run every year. And so everything else that I do beyond that is simply just accessory, because I get bored, because I'm going to be running for an entire year anyway, trying to get into Western States every year. And so for me, once I get Western State out of the way, I'm going to move doing some other things. Now, I know that it's a very closed-minded view, and some runners are like, you're missing out on all these other opportunities. I mean, sure, whatever. Like, we have different things that kind of drive us. So what drives me to continue to run ultras is not a specific 100-miler in a given year. It's that I want to run Western States. And because of that, everything else is training runs. Like every 100 I've done is really a training run if it's a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
Good point.
What's your criteria, Steve? What do you kind of look for in a race?
If it's one of my friends said, you want to do this? I'm like, hey, usually I'll do this.
Okay.
But no, I mean, I actually don't know. I mean, for the past 3 years, it was like all Cocodona. So any race that could prep me for Cocodona was that. But this year, I'm 439th on the wait list because I was driving when it opened up. And it sold out in 15 minutes. And then by the time I got it, so I'm probably not going to get into Cocodona this year, but I will be running Mammoth in September.
Nice.
So that was just because I wanted to do another 200, and that looked pretty local to me. It's only about 8 hours away instead of, actually, it's further away from me than Cocodona. I really didn't know. So I wanted to do that, and then just the 100-miler that I did last year was because I did it with my mom, and it was local to her. And then, that's pretty much it. Like, I love to run, so I just, all my training has just been on the trail anyway, and I'm just trying to climb as much as I can for the rest of the year. I have a big elevation goal for the year.
Yeah, how are you coming with that?
I'm like 20,000 behind just because I was doing some other stuff, but I'm pretty close. So I think like I'm at 184,000 for the year so far.
So,
And
I'm getting there.
well, Troy, before we wrap up, one of the things we do with each of our guests is we do this thing we call Coach's Corner. And so you mentioned earlier that you listen to the podcast, so you know that we do this with all of our guests. We ask a question that has been brought to us by a listener. And so there's no difference here today. And the funny thing about this is, as we had 2 questions and we're only going to cover one of them today, but as we looked at them, Brooklyn, like I said earlier, helps us with this. And we chose this question and she just wasn't sure if it was applicable or not. But oh my God, did you do everything you needed to do to set this question up so well? So we think you're going to be a perfect person to have this question with us as well. It comes from Penny Anderson. She sent this to us, I think, through Instagram. And she said, sleep. How do you know when to sleep and how long in a 100+ mile race? Do you plan it or wait until sleep running? I am running a 140-mile race this year. So the reason we thought this was an interesting question because most people think in terms of having a sleep strategy for a 200+ mile race. And most people do everything they can to avoid sleeping in 100. They don't think it's necessary. They don't think they will ever sleep in a 100-mile race. You slept 3 times in yours, which means you are a perfect discussion point on this as well. So we're going to answer it first. We're going to give you a chance to answer after as well. But Steve, you want to hit it first?
Yeah, I mean, for a 100+ mile race, I'd probably go until I feel like I need to sleep. And then it would be like either a 10-minute to a 20-minute nap if I had to. I had to do that at the Jackpot Ultra, which was essentially a 100-mile race, but it was a 24-hour race. And I was like, you know what? I'm death marching. So a 15-minute nap is going to make me more efficient for the next 2 hours. And then when I did the Mogollon Monster, like I was close to cutoffs, but I was still death marching. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to bite the bullet and take a 10-minute dirt nap. And it paid off dividends because I was able to move much more efficiently. So instead of moving at like a 30-minute per mile pace, you're able to, after a 10-minute nap, you're able to pick it back up to like a 14 or 15-minute. So I would keep going until you feel like you need it.
I agree with that. I think you definitely want to go until you feel like you need it as well. For me, the question actually requires more information a little bit up to that.
Yeah.
You know, what's the total time that you have for the race? Like, what's the overall cutoff that you have? And what do you predict your time to be? Because, you know, if you're going to be pushing cutoffs the entire race, you may not have the luxury of napping. But if you're going to be ahead of pace, and like Troy mentioned earlier, if you bank some time, right, you may have the opportunity, you may have the opportunity to actually take a nap because your overall race cutoff gives you enough time. So I think you have to play that by ear depending on the runner itself and what their pacing plan or pacing strategy is for the race itself. And so I agree, though, for the answer to this, you kind of have to do it when it comes necessary. But if you're pushing cutoffs, I would say you don't nap at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you got, Troy?
I had no intention on sleeping, as I said before. So I pretty much had no choice when it came to this race. So I was like, this is my only option. I'm sleeping. I don't care. I'm on the trail. The bug's crawling on me. It doesn't matter. But it certainly gave me an opportunity to reset. But like I said, I had no plan. But when it came, it was certainly necessary. And I knew that moment when it came. You know, I was not questioning whether it was time to sleep or not. And yeah, that's what I would say. Just wait until you know for sure. And you will know. You will know.
It sounds like the appropriate solution for whatever problem you're having in that moment. Well, yeah. Well, Penny, thank you so much for sending the question. We appreciate it. For those who are listening and have a question of any nature that you want to send, please go ahead and just submit it to us through Instagram, or you can reach out directly to me or to Steve. We'll add it to our list as well. We'll be happy to address it on a future show. And hopefully it'll align with our guests like the past few have each of the times we've done before. So, Troy, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. It has been an absolute pleasure to get to know you a little bit more. Like I said, I've met you back in April of 2024. We talked a few times at the race, but to kind of hear your story and watch the progression over the past year has been really cool to see. And looking forward to kind of see what you do next, even though you're tackling these races that give me a little bit of stress. because they are definitely challenging for us flatlanders here on the East Coast. But thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for the sacrifice from your wife and your kids, because again, you've been doing it for training, but you also had to do that again tonight. So we appreciate that. So please tell them we appreciate them as well. So anything else, Steve, for our guest that we want to ask? Anything?
Nope. I think that's it.
Awesome.
We did it.
Perfect. So Troy, thank you so much.
Yep, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for having me on. This was an absolute blast. Anytime I can have some time just to chat with some guys about running, I'll take every chance.
Same. That's why we do the podcast. All right. So if you're listening and you have not chosen to like, follow, subscribe to the episodes or to the podcast on whatever podcast platform you listen to, or if you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor, go ahead and hit that like and hit that subscribe. We really appreciate it. And leave us a comment or even a guest suggestion if you'd like. We'd love to hear more about people that you know that we may not know. And so please share that with us. And until next time, we will see you all later. Thank you. Bye now.
Yeah.